The Trump administration's immigrant deportation policies are leading to protests in Arizona and around the country. This demonstration took place last night in downtown Phoenix with estimates of 700 to 1,000 people taking part. There were no reports of any problems, but a protest in Glendale Sunday night became violent and unruly with reports of protesters throwing rocks and chunks of concrete and glass bottles at officers. Also, a police patrol vehicle was briefly stolen and several patrol vehicles were damaged. Police at one point used chemical spray to disperse the crowd there in Glendale. There were no reported injuries and no reported arrests. These protests, again, were over the Trump administration's new immigration enforcement actions, including a new policy that allows for arrests at schools and churches and other sensitive locations. Joining us now is Phoenix immigration attorney Elizabeth Chatham. She's a partner in Stinson LLP. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a while since we've had you in here. I think it was the last Trump administration since the last we talked, isn't it?
I think that's right.
So the new policy regarding schools and churches, I think hospitals too, and these sorts, what is this all about?
Well, I mean, this is just one of nearly 89 different immigration enforcement actions by the Trump administration, and it's only been about 3 weeks. So this particular order that was announced is related to securing the borders. That's the name of the executive order. And there was a change in policy where previously in other administrations, actually going all the way back to 2011, schools, places of worship, churches, domestic violence shelters, even hospitals were considered sensitive areas that were protected from immigration enforcement action. And in fact, the guidance, the previous guidance, wouldn't even allow ICE or law enforcement to go near these sensitive areas. And the reason was to actually look at the activities that were conducted at these locations and to protect the larger community. So there was not going to be a chilling effect or fear that someone who is going to attend a Sunday service might actually have an interaction that they weren't anticipating with immigration.
The president says the focus will be on dangerous criminals. How does this get implemented?
It's interesting because it hasn't been truly defined. Dangerous criminals could be someone with an outstanding warrant. It could be somebody that might have had a prior deportation order and it wasn't enacted. It's sort of like a gray area in terms of how it hasn't been clearly defined. In prior administrations, it has been clearly defined in terms of who are the priorities for law enforcement to go and apprehend, arrest, investigate, have conversations with. Here, I think the big difference is I think the community isn't clear. Are these kids in schools that potentially could be named in a judicial warrant? Could they be teenagers that might look like they're affiliated with either a U.S. gang or an international gang? So it needs to be much more clear in terms of what these places of worship and schools need to do if they are facing an interaction with law enforcement.
Well, I was going to ask about that. What if they refuse to cooperate?
Well, they're allowed. The advice. Definitely talk to your legal counsel is the first piece of advice. But secondly, it would be important that there's training and a response plan. And a response plan that some schools or churches could consider would be to identify a core group of individuals that would be the point of contact in order to interact with law enforcement. And then they could be trained on reviewing what a judicial warrant looks like, who needs to sign it. It needs to be a judicial officer. It needs to name the individual that they want to talk to. And so if they have a response plan in place, if those items, for example, there is an assigned judicial order, they can refuse to assist that particular law enforcement.
So basically, you require a warrant.
Yes, they need a valid judicial warrant.
Okay, the impact of this, let's start with education, because the state superintendent of public instruction, a Republican, says he's not crazy about this idea because it means kids aren't going to be going to school.
Right.
Valid point?
That is absolutely a valid point. It's creating a chilling effect. People are scared, families are scared potentially to send their kids to school or have some sort of scary situation occurs. I mean, schools are already concerned about active shooters. Now they're having to learn how to interact with law enforcement. So law enforcement's allowed to be in public spaces and public areas, but they're not allowed to go beyond into private areas that you'd have to be, screened or have someone escort you into the facilities. So a lot of schools in Arizona, they're actually preparing communications that are being sent to families and saying that, in the state of Arizona, immigration status doesn't matter. We will allow and enroll children K through 12, regardless of their immigration status, to attend school. And that really should be the priority. And then, in terms of any interaction that they have, then they would have probably communicated to families in terms of what their response plan looks like.
Right.
That they'll contact parents, make sure that they're informed.
What about testimony at trials? What about reporting crime? Ever since we've had, even SB 1070, these were concerns back then. Are they concerns now with something like this? I mean, can these arrests be made at a courthouse?
Yes, I mean, there is like an allowance that ICE is allowed to be present at courthouses, and that they have to communicate, they have to coordinate that kind of an arrest with both federal and state judicial and prosecutorial officers. You can't just pick somebody up after they are leaving the courtroom and say, now you're going to come with me. It has to be much more coordinated.
Real quickly before you go, we're running out of time here, but just the impact on everyday life. What are you seeing? What are you thinking is going to happen?
Well, what I would love for people to hear is that please don't panic. A lot of information that you're hearing right now is very scary. It's important to get educated. It's important to have a response plan. It's important to know where your documents are. And if you can, make sure your immigration status is secured, then this is the time definitely to pursue that.
All right, Elizabeth Chatham, again, immigration attorney, and it's good to see you again. Good information. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much.